Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I am Utsav Parekh. Let's take a look at the headlines. Ukraine fires American-made long-range missiles into southern Russia, hitting an airfield. Russia says it'll retaliate with a much larger response. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken returns to West Asia for his 12th visit in a desperate push to secure a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas before U.S. President Joe Biden leaves the White House. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol accuses China of espionage. President Yoon accuses Beijing of sending Chinese nationals to South Korea disguised as tourists, who then take photographs of sensitive military sites. Chad's army rescues over a dozen Cameroonian nationals who were kidnapped by militias in a daring rescue. Following the abduction incident, Cameroon and Chad have launched a joint military operation to find the armed kidnappers. And Zimbabwe launches a campaign to eliminate HIV and AIDS from the country by the year 2030. This as around 10% of the country's population has either HIV or AIDS. We begin our show with updates from Mozambique. Protests continue in the southern African nation after the highly contested October 9th presidential election. The ruling Frelimo Party won the election by more than 70% of the vote. The Frelimo has extended its 49-year rule with the win. However, opposition parties have accused Frelimo of election fraud. The runner-up in the election, Venancio Mondlane, who won more than 20% of the votes, says he's the true winner. Mondlane is currently in hiding in South Africa, but he has been orchestrating nationwide protests in Mozambique since November. The protests have often turned violent, with both the Mozambican police and Mondlane supporters resorting to violence.
Soldiers show strength and they show that they are with us. They keep their faces covered because, as it said, they are afraid of the superior order, so they wear masks. But when they arrive, they say, "We are with you. We support the same cause." My protest is not vandalism. No, I am concerned with the future of the young people. What's going to happen with them tomorrow? That's what matters to me.
However, every time violence spikes in Mozambique, neighboring South Africa shuts down its main Lebombo border with the country. This has affected bilateral trade and people-to-people relations.
The most important thing is that the people coming in and out of this border are our livelihoods. But no, there is no one coming in or out here. Our lives are being affected because the Mozambican government is not reaching an agreement with its people. So the economy can stabilize.
Now, it's not just South Africa that's shutting its doors to Mozambique. Several foreign firms in Mozambique are also rethinking their future. 2 Australian firms have already decided to close their operations in Mozambique. They are now thinking of exiting the country. South 32 is a smelting company that is implementing contingency plans in Mozambique. Amid the ongoing post-election violence, South 32 has withdrawn its aluminium production forecast for the year. The mining and metals company says that roadblocks and violence are making the transport of minerals impossible. Another Australian firm, Syrah Resources, is struggling to continue with its graphite mining operations in Mozambique. Syrah Resources has declared a force majeure, which means the company may not be able to meet its yearly deliverables owing to external liabilities. The 2 Australian firms run mining operations in opposite sides of Mozambique. The South 32 aluminium smelting plant is just west of the capital, Maputo. The Syrah Resources graphite plant is in the north, in Balama. Both the Australian firms say that the protests, violence, and the shutting down of the border with South Africa routinely affect production, labor availability, transportation, logistics, and the security of the plants. The protests in Mozambique aren't just affecting the mining operations of the Australian firms, they are also impacting global investors. After the two companies announced the stoppage of their operations, shares of both the companies saw a drastic fall. While the shares of South 32 fell by over 2% since the announcement, the shares of Syrah Resources dropped by a whopping 28%. It's the largest slide in shares for the company in half a decade. The two companies have now demobilized most of their operational personnel from the mining sites. With Australian firms making an exit from Mozambique, it remains to be seen whether other international firms will also pack their bags and leave the country, as Mozambique struggles to contain the post-election turmoil. For more on this, we have with us Fredson Guilane, a Mozambican political analyst, live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Hello. How is the civil unrest in Mozambique impacting the operations of major mining companies like Syrah Resources and South 32? And what are the potential economic implications for the region?
Thank you very much for having me. I think, as you clearly said in your piece, these companies are struggling to operate because they cannot transport the goods. The workers that cannot go to the sites, and also they cannot get important elements to run their own productions. So it's a complicated scenario, and most of these companies depend a lot. Mozambique depends substantially on South Africa to get equipment for operations, but also for transportation of the productions from these companies. For example, aluminium from Mozambique, Mozal aluminium gets transported to the global market through South Africa. So it goes from Maputo to South Africa. It's from there that it's then sent to Europe. And graphite also, it needs to be transported from the site to points of transportation through railway, for example, or maybe through road. So this has been affected by the demonstrations, but I think this has to be not seen regarded only economically, because as you asked clearly, it affects the economy of the region. Lots of South African companies, the South African business community is suffering already from this context, but this needs to be located politically. It's part of the strategy of the leader of this movement to try to make it impossible for business to continue as usual, as a way to force the ruling Frelimo to concede in its demands. So it's a political, it's an economic implication of a political problem that needs to be resolved in Mozambique.
Okay, so while it's a political problem, it's also a human problem. Now, with these companies declaring force majeure, their production is getting affected. What steps are the companies taking to mitigate the risks and ensure employee safety?
Well, I'm not sure about the steps they're taking. I think they would be in the best position to answer to your question. But what I have seen from your piece and what I've read is one of the reasons why they are halting production is to guarantee also safety for their own workers. The safety of the site also, in my understanding, means safety of the workers and of the people. I hope that that's one of the objectives. But I think one of the other things that made these companies easily targeted by the demonstrators is the belief that they are connected to the elite on one side. On the other side, as you know, commodities like aluminium and also graphite, and speaking more generally, extractivism doesn't really create much jobs locally, and it doesn't really change the conditions of the people locally as it could be. So it is very easy to turn these companies as targets in in this kinds of situation, because more than changing the lives of the populations positively, they result in grabbing of the territories of the communities, grabbing the lands, preventing access to water, and also violation of human rights. And Mozale's aluminium has been accused of polluting the air in Maputo, and the companies producing graphite in Cabo Delgado have already been subjected to contestation by the local population because of violations of human rights of communities there. So it's very easy then in a context like this, where you don't create jobs, where you are highly connected with the local elite that is perceived to be corrupt, where you are accused of violating human rights, where you pollute the environment, it becomes very easy for you to be targeted by demonstrations.
So, while that has a negative impact, there must be some positives from, let's say, the exports. When they enter the market, some of the revenue will help the Mozambican government and therefore the Mozambican people. Now, with these protests, with the shutting down of these supply chains, how would this, let's say, impact the GDP, impact your import figures? How would this hurt the regime?
Yeah, it might have, I mean, I wouldn't say a significant impact in the GDP as such, as you probably don't know, but Mozal aluminium contributes 0% in taxes to Mozambique. So it's just sitting there, not benefiting the economy as it was supposed to be. Yes, of course, it creates some hundreds of jobs, but it doesn't employ local communities. I don't believe that the economic impact is going to be so significant because of the nature of these businesses. So the people who are actually going to feel the impact of these measures is the elite. And in this regard, this is exactly what the demonstrators want, because they know that the ruling elite is highly connected with this business. By law, you have to have Mozambicans involved as well. But as everybody knows, not all Mozambicans benefit from that. So if the local people, if the local population were the beneficiary of these investments, obviously they would not going to disrupt them. So we are talking about this is going to affect major the Mozambican GDP, and because we're also talking about a country that relies significantly in foreign aid, so not necessarily from the industrial production domestically. So I believe that this is not going to have that impact, and I'm sorry to say that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your insights. We really appreciate it. And we'll come back to you when there are some more developments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, shifting our focus to the political turmoil in Ghana. Ghana's police have arrested more than 100 people over acts of lawlessness. Most of the arrested people are supporters of President-elect John Mahama. His supporters, who seek jobs under the incoming administration, allegedly attacked state institutions. They reportedly looted properties and engaged in disturbances. The angry supporters also torched 2 electoral commission offices. This was over a delay in the announcement of the presidential election result and disagreements over parliamentary poll results. The protests took a violent turn as the incoming president's loyalists clashed with police officials. The violence has left some police and military personnel injured. The Ghanaian army has warned the public against attempts to disarm deployed soldiers. The army has now allowed its troops to use lethal force if necessary. The new president-elect, Mahama, has condemned the violence and asked his supporters to exercise restraint. He has also urged the incumbent president, Nana Akufo-Addo, Akufo-Addo and security agencies to act decisively and curb the ongoing violence in the West African nation. Meanwhile, Mahama's presidential opponent and the incumbent vice president, Mahamudu Bawumia, publicly asked the president-elect to rein in his supporters who are allegedly involved in the violent attacks. Political tensions in Ghana follow the presidential and parliamentary elections on December 9th. Mahama and his National Democratic Congress, or NDC party, won both the elections, making a comeback to power after nearly 8 years. The NDC leader secured a second term in office after serving as Ghana's president between 2012 and 2017. He will be sworn in again on January 7th.
The results of this election, as declared today by the Electoral Commissioner, show that the National Democratic Congress, with me, John Dramani Mahama, as leader, has just chalked one of the most emphatic victories in the electoral history of the Fourth Republic. We have therefore been bestowed with a very outstanding mandate by the good people of Ghana. I'm deeply honored and humbled to receive such an overwhelming endorsement from the Ghanaian people.
While Mahama secured 56% of the votes, his NDC won 186 seats in the 266-member parliament. The ruling New Patriotic Party, or NPP, managed to secure just 76 seats.
I'm here because when the New Patriotic Party was in power, they didn't do the things they should have done for us. They lied to us. They brought us free education, but you can't say that you'll send us to school for free and afterwards you won't have a job. That's why we voted against NPP leader.
The chaos that ensued in Ghana is coherent with the country's winner-take-all trend. Supporters of the winning party take over government institutions, asking the appointees of the incumbent administration to vacate their posts before the swearing-in ceremony. Similar attacks by winning party members on government bodies have taken place in the past as well, during the transition period. Ghana remains one of the only few successful democracies in the West African region. As the country prepares to turn the page, ensuring a smooth transfer of power should remain the top priority for the outgoing and the incoming leaders. It looks like it's Somalia and Ethiopia have set aside their differences. Leaders of the two countries met in Turkey's capital Ankara last night. The meeting was hosted by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Erdogan first welcomed Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, followed by Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. This was the third round of talks between Somalia and Ethiopia, which Turkey was hosting. However, it was the first time since January that the leaders of Somalia and Ethiopia agreed to be in the same room. Tensions between the two African nations have been frosty since January. That's because the landlocked Ethiopia struck a deal with Somaliland, a breakaway region of Somalia, for access to the seas via the Berbera port. In return, Ethiopia pledged to recognize Somaliland internationally. However, Somalia considers Somaliland an integral part of its sovereign territory, and Mogadishu saw Ethiopia's agreement with Somaliland as a direct threat to its national integrity. Now, Ankara had previously attempted to patch relations between Mogadishu and Addis Ababa in July and August. However, both meetings failed to find a compromise. But this time round, Erdogan has confirmed that both Ethiopia and Somalia will set aside their differences.
With the valuable contribution of both countries, we have created a joint declaration text that we have agreed on today. This joint declaration focuses on the future, not the past, and records the principles that these two friendly countries will build from now on. I congratulate both of my brothers for reaching to this historical reconciliation with devotion and thank them for their constructive attitude.
The leaders of Ethiopia and Somalia also pledged to put their differences aside and work together.
We have common and mutual opportunities to develop together in our own interests. Somalia will contribute towards that, and we are ready to work with the Ethiopian leadership and the Ethiopian people to benefit the opportunities that we had in all aspects.
Allow me to assert here again that Ethiopia's aspiration for secure and reliable access to the sea is a peaceful venture and one that would benefit all our neighbors. With the growing youth population, the demands for our economy warrants such access.
Here's what we know about the Somalia-Ethiopia rapprochement so far. The first step is to improve bilateral ties between the two countries. Both Ethiopia and Somalia will move towards peace and de-escalate tensions. The two countries will hold official talks starting February 2025 and lasting 4 months. The talks will be centered around Ethiopia ending its agreement with Somaliland in exchange for access to Somalia's ports. The declaration also states that both Mogadishu and Addis Ababa will increase bilateral trade and commercial agreements. Now, Turkey had hosted the two nations for talks earlier as well. Ankara has good relations with both Mogadishu and Addis Ababa. This includes multiple drone deals and oil exploration agreements. With Ethiopia and Somalia agreeing to set aside their differences, this means that the breakaway region of Somaliland has now lost the support of one nation. Somaliland recently held presidential elections. Most candidates promised independence, but it continues to struggle with gaining any international recognition. With Ethiopia now normalizing ties with Somalia, Somaliland's ambitions of sovereignty have been thrown to the seas. And now moving to Botswana. The country is home to over 100,000 elephants. It houses more elephants than any other country in the world. But in recent years, a tragedy has hit Botswana. Hundreds of elephants have been dying in the southern African nation. The mystery has shocked the world. What is this silent killer? And how does its deadly grip threaten not just African elephants, but wider wildlife in the region? Our next report has more.
In the sprawling wilderness of Botswana, a chilling mystery unfolded in 2020. Over 350 African elephants were found dead. Their massive body frames were scattered across the sunlit savanna. The sheer scale and suddenness of the elephant deaths sent shockwaves across the world. The fallen guardians of African wildlife were found with their precious tusks intact. So poaching was immediately ruled out as the cause of death. There were no clinical signs of a disease outbreak either. For months, the country of over 100,000 African elephants had one question. What could be the reason that killed these mighty creatures in their prime? Botswana's wildlife officials concluded that toxins in drinking water killed these elephants. And now, scientists have answered how exactly these toxins killed Botswana's majestic tuskers. In the summer of 2020, when humans were combating the COVID-19 pandemic, elephants in Botswana were dying due to a poisonous brew in their drinking water. In the country's Okavango Delta, watering holes across 6,000 square kilometers were contaminated. The contaminant was a microgiant unknown in Botswana, the cyanobacteria or blue-green algae.
A diagnosis of neurotoxic cyanobacterial poisoning from seasonal water pans has been made relating to the elephant mortality in Botswana that started April of this year.
Cyanobacteria are microorganisms that thrive in stagnant, nutrient-rich waters. Some of them produce toxins potent enough to bring down one of Earth's largest mammals. Scientists say that Botswana's fallen elephants likely drank water from several contaminated puddles starting in May 2020. Satellite imagery showed that these elephants traveled an average of 16.5 kilometers after drinking contaminated water. With each sip, the invisible danger mounted until it became fatal. Within 88 hours of the first contaminated sip, the final blow of toxins knocked off the life from the giant bodies of these elephants. Botswana's water puddles became death traps for its elephants. Later, officials promised intervention to prevent such mass die-off events.
Isolation of cyanobacteria in our freshwater system is a concern because it has the potential to negatively impact on our wildlife population, and we will ensure to put up measures that allow us to monitor effectively and intervene where a need arises.
The latest study suggests that similar mass die-off events may take place in southern Africa in the future as well. Climate change is creating conditions ripe for similar toxic blooms in the region. The animals in the region face exceptionally high risks of toxin exposure in the water they drink. The next mass die-off event could be as bad as the worst mass mortality events in Earth's history. In Botswana, the giants of the savannah have fallen not to poachers or predators, but to an invisible, insidious threat born of nature's imbalance. As climate change fuels toxic blooms and human pressures intensify, the stakes for Africa's elephants have never been higher. The question now is urgent. Can Botswana, the sanctuary of Earth's largest elephant population, rise to protect its elephants? Or will the next catastrophe rewrite the country's wildlife history?
That's it on the show today. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching.
It's over! He's done it again! Unbelievable! Oh, straight into the roof of the net.